Hey everyone, me Kevin here. Joe Biden just spoke with a pre-Christmas message. Here's what he had to say. First, Joe Biden came out and he, by the way, just as a preface, he did talk about stimulus and new stimulus checks coming as well, and some other information. So let's get into this. He started off by saying, we need everyone to mask up, stay socially distant, avoid large gatherings, and work in a bipartisan way. That's the only way we're going to get through this, he says. He says, we have our first hint of bipartisanship now, and that is the COVID relief bill that we passed and the Omnibus relief bill, or the funding bill that we passed. He says that the American people want us to reach across the aisle, that is Congress, to work together. And he says that with all compromise, we have to realize that compromise is not perfect. And the current COVID relief package we passed is just a down payment. Now, right now, we have multiple crises that are ongoing, and we need to address all of them. And so Biden then went on to start laying out some of his plans in terms of what was going to come next. So, regarding what was going to come next, he says, we need, first, more help for the vaccine. We have to make sure that 300 million Americans in, America can get the vaccine and we have the money to distribute it. We need more testing because he says the worst is ahead of us, not behind us. He says we need funding for firefighters, police men and women, and nurses. And we need more funding for stimulus. We need funding for rent relief, funding for mortgage relief, funding for unemployment relief. He says that he said 10 weeks, but we know it's 11. He said that the 11 weeks of unemployment is not enough and that we're going to have to do more. And so he says he will put out a plan in late January to take on all of the challenges ahead of the country. We'll get into some more specifics here. First, he says that he's looking for mask requirements potentially on day one, though we kind of walked this back by saying that he would challenge the American people to step up and do their part. He's the one who said the words mask requirements, but then he also said challenge Americans to do their part. They've kind of had a mixed message on that. We haven't gotten a clear message on this. He does say that protective gear should be supplied by the United States government. Personally, this is something that I'm just going to throw in my commentary here as well. I kind of think, like, if we're going to have a Defense Production Act, like, get some factories rolling off more N95s. Just my take. Okay, moving on. Cybersecurity is, and then we'll get into stimulus checks. So then he talks about cybersecurity. Obviously, we've recently had the SolarWinds hack. On cybersecurity, Biden says Russia is responsible for this breach. We will make that clear. We will issue an official statement. Trump isn't doing it. It happened under Trump's watch when he wasn't watching. He says we need a united front at the United States or in the United States, and Trump should share information on what he's doing, but he hasn't been sharing information with Biden. Biden says we will prioritize cybersecurity across the board. We'll strengthen our cybersecurity defenses. And he even implied potentially joint sanctions to punish countries like Russia for violating cybersecurity rules. He's looking for a bipartisan approach to these measures. He says it's time for a season of hope, that Donald Trump has failed by not identifying who's responsible for these hacks and that the damage remains undetermined. He goes on to say that we need international cybersecurity rules. He says that when I learn of the extent, then we can be, or you can rest assured that we will respond, is what he said. He said he won't lay out exactly what the options would be. He says he would not talk about Hunter Biden. Regarding a COVID relief plan, he says he can't assure anything, but he predicts that he will be able to get Congress to work together on 4 things: getting the vaccine out to everybody, getting funding for that as well. He says Republicans will recognize that responsibility because the people are demanding it. It's not just Republicans who are suffering, but it's also the Democrats who are suffering. It's both sides who are suffering is essentially what he's saying. Number 3, healthcare and state unemployment. He says essentially the public won't stand for Congress not providing healthcare and not providing extended state unemployment. And when specifically asked if his plan will include new stimulus checks, he said, yes, my plan will include new stimulus checks. Then he went on to start talking about a reference to Bernie Sanders and saying, look, we were looking for $1,200 stimulus checks. We got $600. But yes, my plan does include stimulus checks. So Biden is suggesting here that he will have a plan at the end of January to provide another round of stimulus checks, whether those will be $600 to catch us up to a full $1,200, or another $1,200 round of stimulus checks remains to be seen. However, we do know that a few days ago, Chuck Schumer told us that, I believe the quote was something to the effect of, if Biden believes we need $600 or $1,200 stimulus checks, we will do $1,200 stimulus checks, which does open that door that Democrats are talking about potentially, after this stimulus check round goes out, doing another round of $1,200 stimulus checks. His plan is also to rebuild the economy. He must have mentioned 4 or 5 times that we're going to start now on infrastructure programs. Keep in mind, this COVID relief bill that we already have right now, the COVID relief bill includes some pretty blunt provisions in terms of extending the solar tax credits, the solar tax deductions, essentially, the credits that you're able to get. It clearly establishes that the Biden administration is going to be very interested in vehicle-to-grid charging and clean energy infrastructure. So that is going to be a big move, especially for the stock market. He keeps mentioning it. So keep an eye on, certain stocks, certainly like Blink and SPE. In my opinion, those are a little more on the overvalued side. Love Tesla, obviously. But anyway, he says that the vast majority of Congress will be able to help with these specific issues. And then he's asked again specifically what he wants, and he gives us even more detail. Again, money for the virus and money for unemployment to continue. He again says that 11 weeks is not enough. But he also wants the eviction ban extended. He also wants the moratorium on mortgages extended. So this is probably the foreclosure ban and some form of mortgage relief, although we do still have mortgage forbearance, maybe some kind of cleanup terms for mortgage forbearance because there are some issues with that. He says we will provide PPE and direct payments to businesses to keep them open, and we will provide for people to go back to work and get new jobs, again, in infrastructure. He says this is not a honeymoon, this is a nightmare that he is walking into, Donald Trump's failures. And again, he reiterates, look, this is not just a Democratic issue, this is an American issue. He then says that, he's asked, what about the legacy of Trump? And what if Trump decides to run again? And what if you end up in a lame duck session? And to this, Biden actually started chuckling and said, I won't be in a lame duck session. Basically, Biden says here he's going to be a 2-term president, and he's going to crush Trump if Trump runs again. It's Biden. Then he's asked if Trump has been cooperative, if there are other areas where Trump has not been cooperative, and he laughs again and says, yeah, there are other areas where Trump has not been cooperative, and says that Trump's failure will end up on my doorstep. So we got a lot of information out of this. I mean, we know now that there's going to be a plan after the inauguration that introduces extension of the unemployment benefits, an extension of another round of stimulus checks, green energy, infrastructure plans to give people jobs to go back to, direct assistance to businesses again, presumably restaurants and other small businesses, actually providing PPE directly to businesses. So we've got a lot of things here. Obviously, we don't have the specifics yet. I imagine he's still working on these specific plans. But this was a pretty thorough press conference. And honestly, I have to say, the Q&A session is really what gave us a substantial amount of insight. So if you found this helpful, get yourself 4 free stocks with Webull. Get your life insurance in as little as 5 minutes. You can do that all via the links down below as usual. Consider subscribing and sharing the video. And folks, we'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.